don't think we're on yet. Oh, now we are.
Cool.
We're live.
Yeah. All right. Kicking it off. All right. I guess
I'll check and make sure that it's working.
Yeah, it is. It says live. Look at the button.
I know it says it, but sometimes.
Do you believe everything you read on the internet?
It's true.
Not
because
very skeptical.
It's true because it's on the internet.
Hashtag bad skeptic.
Yeah. All right. I guess I'm running the show now, so that's cool.
That's literally why we're here.
Yeah, I know. Thanks for joining, everyone. I'm just, for those coming in, I'm trying to kick off my channel. And I wanted to center it around humanism. And that has a broad range of topics that you can go into. Like, you can go anywhere from like science to social justice and stuff. But
I prefer pupperism.
Pupperism too. Oh yeah, we can also show the dog.
Oh, the pupper is there.
Yeah.
Oh, sweet baby.
So yeah. Let me say where I'm at, and then I'm gonna introduce who I'm talking to. Like, I guess I've been really disillusioned by online secularism, as are everyone on this call.
Not me. I think it's perfect.
Oh, sure. Okay. But like, I still think there's a place for stuff like this. Like, I've told this story a few times, but like, I went to a Charlottesville march in Denver right after Charlottesville, and that was really powerful. I saw some pastors speak. Obviously, I didn't agree with their views, but that's okay. Like, they were there.
Maybe they don't kill people once.
Yeah, like white supremacy is bad. And like, I saw a ton of churches out there, and then, you know, I didn't really see any, like, it could be like a numbers problem, but it's like there's no like secular humanist representation. When I looked at the Boulder atheist group, they didn't say anything about Charlottesville. Same with the Denver one. And I'm like, you know, I really like the faith communities around the Boulder, Denver areas' ability to mobilize and create a community for action, if nothing else. And I think there needs to be a place for people like us who don't have like supernatural beliefs and don't necessarily have any like firm religious convictions, but still have like evidence-based worldviews and want to change the world for the better. So that's where I'm at right now, and I think humanism has the potential to be there. So that's what I wanted to talk about today. I'll introduce everyone here. Everyone watching probably already knows, but this is Ari. Hi, Ari.
Oh, hey, Ari.
What?
Am I being watched?
Yeah, it says live.
Oh my god.
There's that whole disclaimer you have to click on before it lets you. Oh, well, you're right there with Jeremiah, so you probably click through it for you. He deceived you.
Oh, we have 2 viewers. That's cool. I don't know how to look at if there's a Q&A or anything, but
you have to go to the link on YouTube and look at the chat.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah, you can do that. While I do that, Callie, would you mind introducing yourself?
Oh, I didn't get to introduce myself.
Oh, yeah.
It was just, this is Ari, no context.
Yeah, this is Ari. This is Ari. Yeah.
I think Ari needs no introduction.
Do you want to introduce yourself?
I'm Ari. I don't know why I'm here. I don't do anything. Bye.
You do all the things. You're on all the podcasts.
I'm eating a cookie.
Yeah. Okay, Callie, you do that, and I'll see if I can look at any Q&As if possible.
I'm Callie. I host a podcast along with Ari called The Gaytheist Manifesto. Jeremiah, you ready yet?
No. Are you still doing the other podcast whose name you can't say? Or whose old name you can't say?
Ish. I have 2 interviews recorded for it that I need to edit together, but time is a problem, and mental and emotional stability is a problem when I dig myself that deep into commitments. So
sounds good.
So it's kind of on indefinite hold. I'm not like saying I'm not going to do it again, but it's definitely on hold for the moment.
Sounds good. And of
No,
course,
that sounds bad.
What?
That sounds bad. We want the show.
Thank you for your support, Ari. Jeremiah, you're a terrible friend.
Yeah.
I don't support your health. I do support your production because this is capitalism, bitch.
All right, that's fair.
Trav, go ahead.
Okay, I'm Trav Mamone. I am the host of the weekly By Any Means podcast, which is an interview-based show where I interview guests about, atheism, secular humanism, social justice, and I also co-host the By Skeptical podcast, which is a broadcast every other week with Morgan Stringer. And that's more of a news commentary show where we basically just vent about, whatever terrible thing Trump has done for the past couple of weeks.
So you haven't had a lot to talk about lately, is what I'm getting.
I listened to that show. It's a very accurate summary. Cool. And I see 2 people in the chat room. Thanks to Spooky Bed Hair and James.
Spooky.
James is cool. And also everyone has a towel because
I got a little one because I'm little, I
yeah,
guess.
You're small. It's May 25th.
You're still a hoopy fruit.
Yeah, we're all hoopy fruits on this call.
A little.
All right. Well, I'm actually kind of interested in hearing about what Trav thinks about like humanism and its capabilities for like progressive change, because actually Trav and I have somewhat similar backgrounds. Like we both came like from like a progressive Christian community, and I know they actually did like a Christian podcast, and I wonder.
Oh really? I didn't know that.
Didn't you?
Yeah, it was called the Something Beautiful podcast. I don't think it's being produced anymore, but yeah, I was there for about a good couple of years, I think.
Oh, okay. Well, like I'm just wondering, like, does humanism still mean a lot to you despite skeptical community shenanigans, or like, do you think it has like the capability of like organizing in a positive way, or what?
Yeah, I think humanism still has a lot of great potential. Now, as far as how we can organize and, help to accomplish more, that I'm still trying to figure out. You did mention, progressive, excuse me, religious groups, and maybe we can try to take a few, tips from them. I'll have to really work on, you know what? That could be a new article idea. There you go. New research project. Yeah, but now as far as the question of, with all the like skeptical assholes out there, do I really want to be a part of it? Well, I mean, I kind of, sort of. I mean, let me put it this way. I'm kind of more interested in partnering with individuals rather than organizations. I mean, I'm still loosely affiliated with the American Humanist Association, and well, yeah, that's the main group I'm a part of too. But I also want to just, I don't know what it is, but for some reason, when human beings gather together in groups around a single cause, people get shitty towards one another eventually for some reason. So I'd rather kind of pick and choose my own little, like, I don't know, group of like-minded individuals who can really get stuff done.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And Callie, if you want to jump in. Like, I don't want this to be an interview. I just thought I'd kick it off, but it seemed like you wanted to say something.
Oh, yeah. I just, like, I don't know. I feel the same way in a lot of ways. I, like, the more and more I watch conversation unfold, the less and less convinced I am that, like, religious belief is any significant differentiating factor in, like, whether or not you're a good person or whether or not you have morals that I think make sense.
Right.
Because, like, I don't hear a huge difference in, like, Jesus is going to send you to hell if you're gay and trans people don't exist because science. Like, those statements are rooted in the same bad ideas to me. And, like, the fact that, the person who's, like, flogging Jordan Peterson's new book, it happens to be an atheist. Like, I I see enough of that stuff from people who call themselves atheists, and enough like amazing social justice work coming from people who have progressive faith backgrounds. I just like, I don't differentiate like, oh, this person's an atheist, so I probably have more in common with them, or they're a Christian, so I probably have less in common with them. Like, that mindset is just completely gone for me. Like, I'm just more interested in, like, obviously what you believe in informs how you behave, and you know, what you believe about the world and that kind of stuff, right? Like, we can't act like those two things aren't completely connected, but like, what I'm actually interested in is how those things play out. So like, if you believe in God, but like we agree on social justice stuff, I don't care. I really just plainly don't care. Like, I'll conversations like, oh, you know, talk me through why you believe what you do. I'm interested in learning how you got to where you are. But like, at that point, it's just an academic sort of like asking questions, getting to know you kind of conversation, more than like, oh, I think you're wrong and I want to change your mind. Cause like, I just can't be bothered to give a shit. Like, I really just can't. You know, I would rather work with 10 progressive Christians than hundreds of people that I've encountered in the atheist community. So, yeah, I mean, I am an atheist. Like, there's no inkling of like supernatural belief or anything like that. I've come to the conclusion that I just don't care about that specific aspect.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, like, the thing that really makes me push back sometimes to that is just, there's sort of like there's still that wooiness that you just don't have to worry about whenever you're like in a group of like skeptics or something. Like,
Well,
what?
I was gonna say, I don't know that I agree with that.
Oh, like what?
Well, I don't know. There are a lot of people who think they're skeptics, but are not very educated in certain subjects, and can be easily taken advantage of. For example, like trans issues, like, oh, your gender is determined by your chromosomes.
Yeah.
If you have a vagina, you're a woman, and that's it. And it's not. I mean, I guess you could kind of call that woo. I mean, it's pseudoscience. It's not really. I mean, I guess there are other things too. You could talk about like alternative medicines, I think, or maybe something that people who consider themselves skeptics might fall for if they don't have the education. So I don't think just because someone calls themselves a skeptic, it means that eliminates that entirely.
I mean, a lot of self-described skeptics have been really shitty. So like, I don't know, but like, I don't know, like, I'll just bring up an example that a few of you knew. Like, I don't want to name names, but
Do it.
I'm not
Stirring shit to get fans. You got to get fans for your channel.
There's actually a really, there's a faith community in Boulder that I organize with, who, like, I really like what they do. They get involved. I've done letter writing campaigns with them, and I was just there a few weeks ago, and they just made this statement that just was super frustrating. Like, one of the people organizing it just got there and was like, you know, like, there's white supremacy in the medical system because like Chinese and indigenous people have been using traditional medicine for thousands of years. What makes that any worse than like conventional Western medicine? And I'm just like,
well, it doesn't work. So there's that.
Yeah. But like the whole other, like, there were things like that day. And it's just like, I want to say something, but like at the same time, the majority of what they're doing is like, that day it was like to combat white supremacy. And like, as a white person, I don't want to be like, I don't want to come in there and be like, oh, that's ridiculous. This whole thing's ridiculous. Like, you're not combating white supremacy, and like, you're getting people killed by having them use traditional Chinese medicine. And like, I didn't say anything that day, but like, that's the kind of thing I wouldn't come across at, say, ReasonCon or something. So,
well, I mean, not that specific thing, but like, I went to an atheist gathering where we did this whole panel, and a good friend of ours spent a lot of time talking about racism and unpacking racism. And one person's reaction was, well, I noticed you didn't talk about black people being racist against white people. Why'd you leave that out?
Yeah.
like, and that's in a gathering of atheists, you know what I mean? So it's like you're going to find that sort of problematic stuff anywhere you go. I think I think you might, the variety might be different. Like it might be a different kind of nonsense. But I don't, to be honest, I don't, and this is 100% anecdotal. I will completely admit that. But like, I just like, I've been among progressive faith groups and I've been among lots and lots of atheist groups. And I don't honestly have a different level of comfort in those spaces. Like, I feel like I'm pretty equally likely to run into people who are just ridiculous or even like innocently, but still uncomfortably ignorant, or like, or just outright terrible about things. So yeah, I don't like, I hear what you're saying and I don't think you're necessarily wrong. I just don't think if you're among a group of like self-identified atheists or skeptics that you're any less likely to run into stuff along those lines. Like it might manifest in different ways.
Right.
I think it's, sorry, go ahead.
People who agree with us all the time in every situation. Just find those people and then fuck everyone else.
I mean, this Google Hangout, pretty much like what we're doing right now. Like just, the four of us just hang out all the time.
Yeah.
And maybe like 5 or 6 other people I can think of off the top of my head.
I recognize like I didn't want to like, I recognize my privilege in that situation. Like I am not under threat in either of those situations you described, but like, I just know like one of those, like from like a cishet white male perspective, like one of those, like just hypothetically, it's like, oh, science denial, that's bad, and like that doesn't happen at the other one, but like that could be my privilege talking. So
well, and I mean, it might just be a different thing because I mean, after the last ReasonCon, there was that hot take about how like people shouldn't correct me on their pronouns because it makes conversation difficult. Like
Thomas Levy.
So
yeah,
I mean, I wasn't going to name names, but
I'm evil.
Yeah. That's true. Kick Trav off. They're not a humanist. They're evil. No evil people allowed on this.
You're not a hoopy fruit.
What do you think, Pete? What do you think about humanism?
Oh, she's stretching.
She say dogism only.
I was going to say Penelope's a doginist.
Yes. She much prefer doggies. Wow, she's making a very silly face right now.
It looks like she actually prefers naps. And like, to be honest, out of the whole thing, I think I'm with Penelope on that one.
Yeah, definitely learned that from me.
She knows how to community organize for naps.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but and you know, to your point, I do have experiences sometimes that make me think like, you know, it's not that we should leave all critique of organized religion behind, like you know, about the specific sorts of harm that like mainstream organized religion does, because there are special ways in which that manifests itself, and it in itself has its own sort of power and privilege that comes with it that has to be fought against, right? And I think the problem is that the sort of like atheist exceptionalism we see, like because we were atheists or humanists, that like that automatically puts us on a different plane than people who aren't. And I think that's really where the problem is. Like I had a conversation with somebody at work. There's a couple of reporters in Cincinnati that have my phone number. So whenever there's a trans news story, I get a phone call and they're like, hey, can we get a soundbite? Whatever. And sometimes they'll like drive the van over and I'll be on camera for a minute or something. And there was a court decision in Cincinnati where, long story short, basically they gave custody to this trans kid's grandparents because the grandparents were going to affirm this kid's gender and their parents weren't. And so I did the thing, and somebody approached me when I was on lunch at work, like, hey, I saw you on the news a couple of weeks ago. Like, I think what you're doing's awesome. I was really glad to, like, I didn't know you were trans, but like, that stuff's super important. I'm glad to see you, doing that work. And she started asking me some questions. It's fine. Like, obviously that's, I'd answer questions and have those conversations all the time. So it wasn't that big of a deal. And it was really, really softball stuff. Like, have you known since you were a kid? Do you still have a good relationship with your parents, et cetera, et cetera. And I mentioned that I lost my last job over being trans, and that where I work now is actually really supportive, and it's like a really good group of people. And she looks at me and she points to the sky and she goes, well, you know who to thank for that. And I was like, and like I resolved a long time ago, I wasn't going to hide. What'd you say, Ari?
Ceiling Goblin? Is that who did it?
We were outside, so it was the sky.
Aww.
Yeah, Sky Goblin. But I definitely resolved that, like, I'm not gonna pretend not to be atheist to make other people comfortable anymore. And so I looked at it just as polite as I could. I was like, well, I'm an atheist, so I just tend to give credit to good people for doing good things. And I'm glad I landed among a good group of people who look out for me and take good care of me. And she kind of like furrowed her brow for a second. She's like, well, my time's about up. I got to get back inside. You have a good day. And I was like, we're both on lunch. It could have legitimately been the end of her lunch break, but like just the look on her face when I said that, it was like, so there definitely is still something to be said for the fact that, like, I mean, just mentioning the fact that you're an atheist makes some people uncomfortable. Like, that's still a thing that happens. So it's not to dismiss that conversation and that side of things entirely. It's just like, I don't know that it's the primary organizing point of much of anything that I do anymore.
Yeah. I know we have like mutual friends who like have been, involved, and then like they'll give speeches at like conferences and stuff, and there'll still be like, why is an angry black guy yelling at me?
Right.
And it's like,
let's stop accusing people of sexual harassment until they're convicted in a court of law or whatever.
Yeah. I really feel like, because there's a spectrum of political beliefs like in every religious sect, and I really see that even in like a liberal, progressive, lefty or accepting place like Reason Con, there will be accepting people, and then there will be like people who are pushing for progress, and there's just like there's a bit of a slight division there if we're gonna keep dividing people more and more, because we're being divisive.
Yeah, I was talking to this guy that I work with the other day, and I don't know if he knows that I'm trans, because it's not something I go out of my way to bring up to people, but like if it becomes relevant in conversation, somebody's like, oh, like you were off the last couple of days, where you been? Like, oh, I went to speak at a conference. Like if it comes up, I don't hide it from anybody, but I'm like, hi, I'm Callie Wright, trans woman. Like I don't do that kind of thing. I don't know if this guy knows that I'm trans or not, because I've told a couple of people at work and they seemed surprised. Like, I don't know, it doesn't matter. But he was telling me a story, because he said he used to be like a really hardcore firebrand atheist, and he's now he's a progressive Southern Baptist. And I was like, that's really interesting to me. Are you okay like answering questions about what you believe in? And he's like, yeah, sure. And I said, okay, so progressive Christian, I have lots of progressive Christian friends. That's not weird to me, but progressive Southern Baptist is kind of weird to me. Like, how do you get there? Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm skeptical.
And so, I mean, like we had like a 15-minute break to have this conversation. So I didn't get deep with the guy or anything, but he told me that he used to be a conservative Christian, and that he had a friend that he went to school with that came out as trans, and people in his church ostracized her. And he was like, the God that I believe in wouldn't expect me to abandon my friend. So this church isn't the place for me. Like, I'm going to go a place where people are accepting of people like that, because that's who I think God is. And I'm like, gosh, I have so many questions about how you reconcile all of that. But the fact that that's where your head at demonstrates to me what's important about you. So like, I'm interested in all of the questions surrounding his religious belief and how he reconciles, things that are said in the Bible about queer people, about people that are different in general. Like, I'm interested in all of those things, but I don't know that they matter so much to me. Like, what matters to me is the fact that, like, when the time came to make the decision to pick his religion over his friend, he picked his friend, and was willing to look past whatever his religious programming might tell him about how he is supposed to treat this person. Like, he made the right decision. And so like the rest is sort of academic to me.
That's kind of how you started falling out of religion too, right? Was because you had a gay friend and it made you question things a little bit more.
Well, no, because
because that's what you've told me. So you just fucking lied to me.
You're not really wrong.
That got awkward real fast.
You're not really wrong.
Only a little wrong.
The thing was, like, I'm looking back at what I was raised in, and there are two possibilities, maybe three for both, but like either I was not educated properly on the totality of the beliefs I was raised in, or 2, I didn't pay attention. So I was not raised to believe that being gay was bad. And so like really, when my gay best friend came out as gay, I was just like, oh, okay, well, he's my friend. And then later, when the pushback for, LGBT equality came very largely from churches and stuff, I was like, what the heck is this? And then I looked at the teachings and I was like,
that's what it says.
And I'm like, oh yeah. So I don't know. So Trav, you've been quiet over there. You have any I don't want to talk over you, but
no, it's fine. I don't know. I'm mostly a listener than a talker, which is weird since I'm a podcaster. You would think
that's an odd personality trait for a podcaster.
Oh, Callie, I have to literally script out all my questions and even the stuff that I say on the Biskeptical podcast, or else I will totally be lost in thought. You can tell on both shows when I go off script because I say and so many times. But anyways, going back to what we were talking about earlier, I actually was at the Creating Change Conference, which is an annual conference, for those who don't know, put on by the National LGBT Task Force. And Sincere Carabo, formerly of American Human Association, approached me last year and wanted to know if maybe I could do some sort of co-lead some sort of workshop about basically just to bring, a humanist voice to there, because I don't know, humanism and atheism, they're not represented a lot in the conference. I think there's Zach Ford's annual sort of caucus, atheist LGBT caucus that he does, where basically it's like, hey, we're all atheists and we're queer and trans, we're all going to gather in this room to chit chat about whatever comes to mind, so come on over. And that was pretty much it. So long story short, it was me, Ashton P. Woods, Dan Burkholder, and Tate Walker, and we did a presentation called Humanist Inclusion and Interfaith Activism. And I remember saying at one point during my part of the workshop, I said, when it comes to relating to people with different opinions, I guess it depends on what the opinion or belief is. If your faith motivates you to seek justice, love mercy, walk humbly, that's fine with me. I mean, I'll definitely still have that conversation where if you ask me, I can definitely say why I don't think, you need a God for all that. But I don't really go into the whole, oh, that's ridiculous, this, that, and the other. But if your beliefs motivate, if your God tells you that certain people shouldn't have certain rights or shouldn't even, exist because, who they are or what they say or whatever, that's when I become the firebrand atheist,
Mm-hmm. What about the religions that teach you that the earth is flat? That's my religion. Did you see the new flat earth model that came out recently?
Oh, what?
About the ice globe?
Oh, the ice globe?
Yeah, what you know the ice wall theory?
Yeah.
So
like a snow globe? You just shake it up and it snows?
Not quite. So the theory is that the earth is it's flat, but it's resting in a divot in a globe made of ice. So that makes the ice wall.
So when we look up at the sky at night, we're looking at the ice wall.
No, it's underneath.
No, we're looking at the globe.
No, the globe is underneath us. We're at the top in a divot on the top of the ice globe.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, so it's like an 8-ball or something, or like a bowl.
Yeah, it's like an 8-ball. Yeah,
like a bowling ball, and we're in the peg.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Oh, that's ridiculous.
I want those drugs in my
life. That's my religion, and if you don't like it, oh well. Yeah. It's not telling me to, hurt people, I guess.
Yeah, that's my religion, and if you don't like it, you're a transphobe.
Yeah.
Like, okay, so
Globes all the way down.
I think there's Trav is bringing up people that like I know have had some like disappointment with just like how slow humanists are to get on boards with things like the cliche about like hurting cats and shit like that. But like I feel there's sort of a reticence to like actually get involved, and like so much of the discourse I see like skeptics talking about is discourse about discourse and like changing people's mind and like, oh, you have to convince people that you should use people's pronouns, or like you have
instead let's just force them.
Yeah, like
that's what I said.
Well, it's like you have to convince people that Black Lives Matter, and like so much of it is focused on like even just arguing online, and like there's nothing wrong with like educating people on your Facebook wall, but like I am really frustrated with the slowness it takes to like actually involved, because like I don't know about you people, but
you people.
What you mean, you people?
But like before the election, I was like, oh, it's okay. Like Donald Trump is just gonna like make himself look like a shithead on TV, and then he'll lose the election worse than any other person before.
Oh, you have so much faith in humanity, and I think that's adorable.
I had it
when we were young and stupid.
Afterwards, I was like trying to convince people out of like ridiculous positions is almost completely useless at this point. Like what changes the world is movement and organizing, and I'm really frustrated about that.
Are you the people who never had their minds changed and still believe the wrong thing?
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, so that was the panel that Alex and Lalandra and I did at the Milwaukee Humanist thing. Was we were talking about like how do you convince people to care about social justice or like whatever your pet issue is. And Alex made a good point, and he was like, you know, the part of the problem is not convincing people to care, it's convincing people that there's a problem to care about in the first place. Right? So like it's almost starting at step 2 when we're starting at step 1. Like you can't convince someone to do anti-racist activism until you convince them that racism is still a problem. And so many people are at the racism denial stage still. And so like that's the conversation.
Think they're transphobic. They're like, I'm not transphobic, I have a trans friend or whatever. And it's like, well, you've just, you know, stated these opinions or used this language that's very harmful. And they're like, wang. That's how they respond to that. They say, wang. So it's not that they agree that transphobia is a problem if it's worse than their transphobia.
Yep.
But when it comes to what they do, they don't think that is transphobia. So like Callie said, it's convincing them that that there is that problem in the first place rather than convincing them to care about it, I guess.
And it's downplaying the width and breadth of the problem too, because they'll say, oh yeah, I really don't like that these people are carrying Nazi flags and shouting literal Nazi slogans. I disagree, and if you have any stronger feelings than that, you're part of the problem too, and you're just as bad as them. So like that's part of it too, is like they're convinced that the you know, the mere act of saying like, yes, I don't agree with what they're saying makes them the good guys, and like that's not how any of this works.
No.
Did you want to say something, Trav?
Well, actually, it's funny. It's funny that you mentioned. I think you must have listened to my latest episode when you said that, you know, yeah, we can try to, you know, reason with people, but I think what's more important is you know action and organization, because that's exactly what Amanda Marcotte of Salon.com told me on this week's episode of the By Any Means podcast. We were talking about her new book, Troll Nation, and how like, the right has basically gone from like, neoconservative ideals to, you know what, let's I'm tired of being nice. Let's select like the biggest asshole we can find. That'll really trigger the libs.
The horse loose in the hospital.
Yeah.
Bear in the china shop. That kind of thing. Yeah.
Yep, basically. And so at the very end, I asked her, well, what can we on the left do with our current political situation? And she said, it used to be that, well, if we talk to conservatives and try to reason with them, that'll help us. It's like, no, actually, I think what's more important is, you can't change everyone's mind. So the most important thing, especially nowadays when they're, digging their heels, trying to, they're like the monkeys doing the see no evil, hear no evil thing when it comes to all the stuff Trump's doing. And so what the left needs to do is basically, start organizing, start, marching in the streets, demanding action. That's the stuff we should be working on rather than just, reaching across the aisle. Don't get me wrong. Reaching across the aisle has its place, and sometimes it works. But, well, like they say, actions speak louder than words.
I mean, my thing is like the right thing to do is what works, right? And sometimes that's conversation, sometimes that's storytelling, sometimes it's making the lives of people in power miserable, sometimes it's throwing bricks and punches. Like
I was about to say, sometimes it's punching Nazis.
We make that joke, but like, I mean, that's literally true. Like sometimes that's what it takes, right? And I am not the extremist that's like, I want to punch and set on fire anyone who disagrees with me. Like that's not the point. But like the point is that if we're honest about the consequences of these problems, right? We are talking about people literally dying and people's quality of life. Yeah, exactly. And even more broadly than that, people's quality of life being severely diminished, people living in squalor and poverty because of this stuff, right? This isn't like, oh, if this law doesn't get passed, I'm going to be mildly inconvenienced and I'm going to be kind of annoyed. Like people treat a lot of the problems that we're talking about like they're on that level, right? And it's the P word, it's privilege, right? It doesn't affect me, so it's not that big of a deal. I can acknowledge like, oh yeah, we should do something about that, but there's a level of urgency that's not there. And like people are dying, and if I have to punch somebody in the face to stop that from happening, I will punch somebody in the face. I'd rather have a polite face-to-face conversation. I'd rather sit down with somebody over coffee and talk them out of what they're thinking. But at the end of the day, if they leave that conversation, they're still going to be causing harm to people, then things have to escalate. That's how stuff has to work.
Yeah. And I think there's a huge place for productive conversation or productive disagreement and conversation. Like a lot of the times people treat it as like, should you talk to people you disagree with? And I think that's a ridiculous framing because
yes it is.
I disagree with all of you on probably some substantial, if not too important things, but it's
like what good music sounds like for one.
Yeah.
That's very substantial.
I lighten the mood. Yeah.
I had to say whether or not the lick is okay.
Yeah.
That's something we disagree on.
I think, but there's a place for that productive disagreement. And I think there's a way to move forward while still hashing things out. I'm thinking of a thing that James Croft said somewhere recently. Like after this huge rightward shift in America, we're seeing this like far center, I'll call it, just like all they're doing is calling out the left, and it's baffling to me because like
very wise.
if you are the center,
Trav is just name calling everyone today.
Trav is helping me stir shit to get fans.
Right. Thank you for bringing the troll.
Like if you're actually the center, like if your beliefs are independent of all sides and parties, and America takes like a huge rightward lurch all of a sudden, you should be like lefter. I guess.
No, because they're in favor of the truth and the left is more wronger.
Yeah. So like it's like what James Croft said recently was it's like in this age of distress, like there's this contingent of folks who just want to debate, and And that's all they want to do. And there's almost this assumption that everyone's on board with, well, of course sexism is bad, and of course homophobia is bad, and of course racism is bad, but don't shout down people who are speaking. Like, that's like, the focus is incredibly off, and like the whole purpose should be like, in a place where those things are under threat, those are the things we need to double down on. And I don't know like what's wrong with like people who for those they're almost taken as a given, you know.
Well, I forget who this quote comes from, but it's one of my favorite things that I've ever heard anyone say, and it's the fact that some people prefer at least the visible absence of conflict to the existence of justice, right?
Mm-hmm.
So they would rather, because we know that like in, you know, racial unrest, I'm probably not going to be the one who faces the brunt of the consequences if that happens, right? Mm-hmm. So my preference, at least my instinctual preference that's given to me by my cultural programming, is to just prefer, like, I don't want people in the streets getting hurt and fighting and conflict. Like, I'd rather there be this visible peace, but there's not actually peace happening, right? People are being incarcerated unjustly. People are being killed unjustly. People are being assaulted unjustly. Those things are still happening. They're just less visible. And so people don't critique those things. They critique the just reaction to those things. It's like, you know, how many people have to be unjustly murdered before we say like, yeah, you know what? People are probably justified at like marching through the streets and stopping traffic. Like, I actually feel like that's maybe a smaller sized reaction than the problem actually is. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Like, yeah, but
whoever gets upset or shows emotion is automatically wrong and loses the argument for some reason.
Right. Well, no, except for when the person calling people out for showing the emotional reaction, show emotional reaction and reaction to that emotional reaction. That's okay to do. That's okay to do.
Being mad.
I think I got lost in all those reactions.
So do all the people I'm talking about.
Yeah. It's that might have been MLK who said that. I don't know. Who said we prefer like you know, peaceful injustice or something like that. I don't know. But, yeah. So like, I think, and I think what Trav was talking about with Amanda Marcotte, like, I certainly agreed with her, and she probably put into words a few things that had been up in my brain, but she put them into words that like was brilliant and made a lot of sense. And I think along with the organizing, for me, like, I don't have a huge platform at the moment, but like, for me, I'm starting to think that, you know, people with big platforms shouldn't get involved. Like, I agree with Callie when she's talking about how like we need to do more storytelling, because that's more compelling to your average person than just giving them the facts. And I think
honestly, I think what it comes down to is that people need to do more of what they are good at, right? Mm-hmm. Because there are some people who are good at storytelling. The people who do that need to do it. The people who are good at organizing need to do it. The people who are good at organizing in-person resistance and unrest, like, people need to do that, right? Like, I don't think it's like we need to get a group of specific people together and say we all need to be doing this thing, right? Like, everybody has their own talents and I just think we all need to be doing whatever fits our personalities and our talents the best, right? Like, if 10 times more people got involved and spent like just 10 minutes a week doing something, you know what I mean? Like, obviously people stay busy. Not everybody has money or time. I get that. But like, 10 or 15 minutes a week or 10 or 15 minutes a day, like, just imagine what that would be like. And I think a lot of people get intimidated because they're like, oh, I don't have a platform, or I can't get in front of a city council meeting and speak. And it's like, people don't necessarily realize that, like, that's not all of what activism is, right? Activism can be a ton of different things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I don't know. I think visibility is super important.
Mm-hmm.
one of my first week videos was on that, but basically a few years ago, I would have thought that like, oh, okay, it's a thing to check off. Make sure you have a diverse group of people at your insert thing here. But now it's sort of like, oh, these are the people whose lives are under threat. We need to focus on them and help them tell their story. So I don't know. Like, I think trying to give more visibility to people challenging that in the under the framing of, oh, we're just having a discussion is really bad, because it's in giving somebody more visibility, you're, whether you like it or not, unless you're hammering them and really, really challenging them, you're essentially giving them more of an audience. So
yeah, well, the part of that conversation that I guess I had kind of missed, that Stephanie Zavon pointed out to me, that kind of changed my thinking on a lot of it, is it's important to remember who's platforming who in a particular situation, right? Because, you know, if I go on right-wing talk radio, I'm the one being given a platform, right? I'm not the one giving them a platform. They've got an audience of thousands of listeners that are going to listen to whatever this person has to say for an hour, right? And if I'm on there, I'm the one being handed the platform. So it makes sense for me to do that if I have the capacity to do it, right? Not everyone does, and that's okay. I'm very much against this idea that like all trans people should go into hostile territory like that and do that kind of thing. I think it's important work for people who want to do it and for people who have the capacity to do it. But I don't think people should feel compelled or obligated to do it. But like, for example, I had somebody reach out to me, somebody that I went to high school with, who I keep in touch. We talk every great once in a while. He's a Christian, quasi-conservative. He's not like super hardcore right-wing or anything like that, but he definitely has right-wing beliefs on like LGBT stuff and that kind of thing. And he sent me a message on Facebook, and he was like, hey, so I have this friend who's starting a podcast on biblical sexuality. I thought he might be a cool guest for your podcast. And I was like, I doubt it. But like, I wanted to kind of, for more details, right? Because
we're getting a little choppiness right there.
Oh yeah, sorry. There's like,
just go back to what he told you. I think just if you could repeat that.
So he said he had a friend who was doing a podcast on biblical sexuality, and he thought his friend might be a good guest for my show. And I'm like, okay, well, so what does biblical sexuality mean to you? Because like, you can ask 100 different people and get 100 different answers, right? And it was basically, you know, being gay is wrong. Yeah. And so I was like, I'm not going to invite someone on my show to defend my humanity. That's just not a thing I'm going to do. And it's not that conversation is entirely not important, but the show that I do is not the place for that conversation. Like, I'm never going to invite someone on my show to challenge the validity of my identity or Ari's identity, or, you know, anyone who listens to the show. Like, it's not a conversation I'm going to have on that show. I was like, if he wants to have me on his show, that's a different story. Because that's his audience, right?
And I can talk about all the fun sex I have.
Right. Yeah. Biblical sexuality, like that. Oh God, I don't know. If I was a quicker thinker, I probably could have come up with a really fun joke about sex in the Bible. That's why I'm not a comedian. It's fine.
Right. There is a bit of that. As much as I hate to like concede the point, there is a little bit to the like purity, like the purity testing stuff, especially with that. I know with like ContraPoints, who I love on YouTube, like she like got invited out to like a slightly like a free speech group, which unfortunately now has bad implications, and like she got a shit ton of shit for the conversation about like trans issues with people.
No free speech about trans issues.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like, no, that's the people she needs to be like talking to. So I don't know. Yeah, I think there's a lot of nuance to be had, and I think that's one reason why I still kind of, maybe this is my bias because it's my in-group, but like the whole skepticism and humanism thing still has that critical thinking aspect that allows for nuance. And I'm not saying other other groups don't have it, or self-described atheists or whatever. But it's like that is something that is valued to other. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, my thing is. The thing that's important for me is not obligating specific people to have certain conversations, because again, I think those things are important to happen. But what kills me is when people are like, so like, for example, there's it's not Alex Jones right wing, but it's like traditional mainstream Republican talk radio in Cincinnati. And I was invited on to talk about bathroom bills. And when I went on and did this thing, there was somebody that was like, oh yeah, this is how you do activism. Trans people should be doing this all the time. And I'm like, no, that's not how this works, right? Because the point is, those are important conversations to have. And I think it's good if people want to do it. But there is a huge risk to that emotionally and psychologically, right? There are people who wouldn't be able to handle that. And that's not a failing or a bad thing on those folks' part, right? Because you are literally defending your humanity, and there is a cost to doing that. And it's not fun. It wasn't fun for me, but I'm in a privileged enough position to where it's not super damaging to me. I mean, I sure as hell didn't have a good time doing it, but like, after it was over with, I spent some time decompressing, looked at pictures of cute animals online, vented to some friends, and I was okay, right? But I also don't have a ton of trauma around being trans in my past that could have been triggered by a conversation like that. So, it's important. I do think there's a legitimate critique to be had about sort of even validating the conversations around the humanity of trans people, because, in some respects, by engaging in those conversations, we're legitimizing that there's even a question of that. But at the same time, I mean, we do live in a society where that frankly is a question, right? As shitty as that is, like, that is a question that our society is debating. And I don't know that a blanket policy of everyone not engaging is the right thing. But I definitely know that telling every trans person that they need to be involved and that they're not doing their part if they're not, that is 100% the wrong way to approach it too. So
yeah, I want to make some more space for Trav, because we're getting close-ish to the end. I don't want to keep y'all long. I want to make sure they put in words. Trav, are you doing your part?
Well, I tried to. I'm still trying to figure out what exactly what part I should play. It was funny, Callie. You were just talking about this whole idea of like, oh, this is how it's done. Everyone should go talk to right-wing conservatives to get them to change their minds. No, because, well, let's face it, not just LGBTQ people, but people of color, women, and whatever marginalized group. The onus is always on us to defend our humanity and educate others. And I mean, I don't mind being a source of information, but I don't want to be like the primary source too. I can only take someone so far.
Yeah, I know. As someone, like, I've recognized that it's like, even though I really like Trav, you don't even like really talk about like LGBTQ issues exclusively unless your guest is popping up. So like, I like the Gay Theist Manifesto, and I realized, oh, even though I love these people, like, I don't want you two to be my only source of input. Like, I have to actively go out and listen to other groups and stuff like that. So I don't know if I'm not looking for ally cookies, but that seems like one thing that allies could do, like actively seek out that type of stuff too.
Yeah, I give a trans 101 talk to a gender studies class at a college locally here, and it's like the very first thing I say in my talk is that, like, my perspective is one perspective, my experience is one experience. Like, you can talk to 100 different people and hear 100 different stories. So like, you can't come away from this thinking like, oh, I get the trans thing now. Like, that's not how this works. So like, if you really want to understand,
when I was like your episode 20 or 30, that was me. I was like, oh, okay, I get it now. So.
Yeah. And so just like, you can talk to one trans person and like, there's tons of my experience that's probably going to be common across a lot of folks. And there's going to be lots of my experience that's unique to me. And there's going to be lots of experience that I have zero reference for. And like, if you really want to understand, like, you have to listen to a bunch of different people, and you have to read a bunch of different stuff and listen to a bunch of different podcasts and watch a bunch of different YouTube channels and et cetera, et cetera. Like, you just have to.
Mm-hmm.
And use Google, please. Just like, shit. Don't like waste somebody's time answering all these minute
I've done
questions.
That to Callie too. Like, she wrote a blog post. I'm gonna call myself out, okay?
Okay, do it.
What you wrote, like, it was supposed to be a blog series, like answering the bathroom debates, part 1, and the opening paragraph to Callie's thing was like, there has never been a confirmed trans person assaulting someone in a bathroom ever. And I remembered this story, so I like immediately Googled and I found that story. I put in the effort to find that story, and then I emailed Callie saying, what about this? And then I scrolled down to the rest of the blog post and I found it, and Callie had actually answered it. And so
I think it's really funny that you remember my blog post more than I do.
You don't like blogging though, right?
Not really. It's not my medium.
Mm-hmm. Leave that to Trav.
Yeah.
Sounds good. Did anyone else have any closing thoughts? I know somebody in the chat said they asked for your channels because they think you guys are YouTubers.
That's hilarious.
I'll let you put in plugs later, but we're talking to podcasters right now. So if anyone else has any closing thoughts on if humanism is still a thing to push, because we do have a group of like progressive minded people that we're all friends with, we can at least mobilize a little with, if that's worth pursuing. Or if it's all just doomed and we should all just say fuck it and go on to other communities or whatever. So I don't know.
I think if humanism is doomed, then every community is doomed. I think I think these problems exist probably in similar proportions in literally every community and every sect of people, and they seem particularly amplified because it's the group that we happen to identify with. And that's not to minimize the problems that exist. They are great, but I don't think they're uniquely great. And I think we could do ourselves a disservice by saying like, oh, well, we're just leaving organized atheism and humanism behind, and we're going to go over to this community here. It's going to take us 6 months to figure out the same shit's happening there too. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So
your roller derby thing.
Yeah, like I'm gonna get into roller derby, and I'm gonna find out terrible things about people. Like I just know that's gonna be a thing, right? And so I think take steps to protect yourself. Obviously, if you personally feel like it's too toxic, obviously, like I don't feel like anybody should be obligated to stick around in a place where they don't feel welcome or comfortable or anything like that. I just think I don't know. I think it's worth sticking out in one degree or another, kind of like Trav was saying, like I'll partner with organizations on specific things. I'll go talk at conferences and I'll do stuff with individuals, but like I'm not ready to like hang my hat and endorse like specific organizations or specific people anymore, just because like I've been burned by people who seem to be friends far too many times to have that level of trust. And it sucks, maybe that was me being naive. Maybe that's victim blaming too. I don't know. So yeah, I don't know. That's not really a definitive or satisfying answer, but that's kind of where I'm at.
Mm-hmm.
For me, it's not so much about quote unquote humanist community, but more like humanist principles. And I still think that even if there was no community, or I should say no big humanist movement or atheist movement, humanist values are still worth fighting for.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Do you have anything, or are you just gonna make a joke, snarky joke?
I could do both.
Oh,
Gosh, way to derail their plans, Jeremy. Jeremiah. I thought your name's Jeremiah. Jesus.
Ari's like, why am I even in this
room? I don't know why I'm here.
I want to pet the dog.
I'm a bad humanist because I like expect people to be terrible all the time. Like that's something that Jeremiah and I talk about all the time. Like someone that we like or father work will do something and that's disappointing, and Jeremiah and I will be like, oh, I'm so disappointed, so angry, I can't believe they did this, and I'm like, yeah, they're a human, they suck, of course they did that. So I don't even know how I square being a humanist with also being a horrible misanthrope. So
the way I frame it is like, I don't like humans, but only because humans make other humans suffer, and I don't like human suffering.
Okay.
So, I don't know.
Right? Yeah. So it's like in fact, I was just thinking the other day. It's like when it comes to, I'm a little bit of a misanthrope as well. It's like I still believe in the inherent worth and dignity of all human beings, but I can only take, when it comes to like socializing with people, I can only take very small amounts of it because human beings are still really messy and fucked up. They have inherent worth and dignity, but they're fucked up.
I like that.
That is a great summation of humanity, I think.
I can't think of a better way to end that. So thank you, Trav. So can you put your channels in the chat, folks?
Channels.
Trav, I don't know. Do the rounds. We've all done this before, but plug your stuff. I know you guys are doing me a favor by like being on, so thank you. I appreciate it and helping me kick it off, but still plug your stuff anyway, because that's how the formalities do. So
sure. They can find my podcast By Any Means, that's by spelled B-I, and the Bi Skeptical podcast at iTunes, Spreaker, and Stitcher. And yeah, that's pretty much it. I do have a YouTube channel. I think it's Team Mamone 83. Basically, just go. Just look for By Any Means or Bi Skeptical on YouTube. I don't really do videos so much. I just post links to my podcast episodes on there. So you'll basically just see like the podcast logo and just hear the audio, and that's it.
Callie?
So Ari and I host the Atheist Manifesto, and it's a pretty okay podcast about gay stuff and trans stuff, and sometimes religion and humanism and atheism. And I don't know. I cross post the show on YouTube, although I'm like 10 episodes behind because I'm terrible. But we recorded video of the last episode, and it turned out pretty okay. So I'm probably going to post that soon. I may make that a thing. But yeah. So the Atheist Manifesto. Yeah, check it out.
I'm also on that. The Atheist Manifesto. I also do another podcast with Marissa McCool called The Cis Are Getting Out of Hand, which is a podcast for trans people by trans people, and cis people are allowed to listen if they hate themselves. Jeremiah and I do the SJW Circle Jerk podcast whenever we freaking feel like it, and talk about whatever we freaking feel like talking about. And I also am the editor and co-producer of Reasonable Risk, and I don't do anything, but I also do way too many things.
Sounds
good. So that's the end.
All right. James liked the show tonight. Thank you, James. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I love all of you, and if I ever want to talk to people, it's people like you. So
if you.
So cool. I'm
Thanks
just gonna
for
end
letting me have your little
end the broadcast. So thanks. Bye.
Bye.